Welcome to Innovator Insights, where we explore the minds shaping the future of tomorrow's leaders. In this episode, Scott sits down with Brett Salakas, HP Education Ambassador, best-selling author of A Mammoth Lesson, and founder of Aussie Ed, to trace his journey from classroom teacher to global edtech advocate. Learn how to spot and avoid innovation theater, and discover practical steps for turning ideas into real impact. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Innovator Insights podcast. I'm Scott Fisher. I'm in New York. Joining me today from Australia is Brett Salakas. I hope I pronounced that properly. Thanks for joining today, or tomorrow as it is there.
That's it, bro. You've got it right, Scotty, straight off the bat. Like, always one step ahead of you Americans. That's why there's so much innovation coming out of Australia and New Zealand. We just got that tiny edge.
That's terrific. I appreciate that perspective. So let's start off straight away. We'll jump right in with this question. Can you give me your definition of innovation? And by extension, what is therefore an innovator, or vice versa?
Yeah, look, I think broadly speaking, innovation is all sort of relative. If we're honest, it's so easy to think of, especially like as AI is getting rammed down everyone's throats and squirted on like sauce over a kebab, like AI this and AI that and innovation and all that sort of stuff. I think take a step back and go, innovation, for most people, it's relative to where they are.
Okay.
If you're meeting if you're on holidays and you're going to some remote sort of tribe and you've got something that they maybe haven't used before, or you're able to show them a technique that maybe they are unaware of, that can make their life a little bit easier, then that's a big leap in innovation, in sharing of knowledge. I think I come from an education background, or once upon a time a school teacher and a principal. Like, I think when you look at the development of the human child, there are different phases of innovation, different phases of enlightenment. Those moments where you have those light bulb, penny drop sort of moments where you can see someone gets something,
Right.
And they go, right, oh, okay, this new writing technique, that's innovative. This new, this new way of speaking, this new way of writing, this new mathematics algorithm, like these are all innovations. And it's all relative to where you are. I look at even people in the workplace. On a personal note, my sister works quite senior within government, in a military branch, and I've had multiple discussions with her about AI being able to lighten the load of her job.
Really?
And she just struggles to be able to see it. And she's, for about the last 12 months, she's been really, really resistant. AI can't do my job. AI and my job is too human-centered. Like, you need to know the stuff inside out. And slowly, every family gathering I have, there's a little bit more of a chip away. And she actually said to me the other day, she goes, I'm using Copilot. It makes my emails so much more effective. I can get my email done so quickly. And I'm like, this is what I've been saying to you.
That light bulb moment, right? Where it finally clicked for them. And I think that's key to acceptance with anything new, but, as we're talking about innovation and specifically AI, once people find what's in it for them, they see the value for them and how it makes their life better or improves their work or whatever the case is, now it's got some real added value, where previously it was just some theoretical thing that maybe they didn't quite grasp. But now that they're seeing it, as you just mentioned with your sister, it's like, oh, this is pretty good stuff.
I think when we look at human development anyway, like, for survival, there is an element of being self-centered, egocentric. I think, like, for human survival, innate ability for the human species to survive and propagate, we need to be focused on self. When you're a child, you need to cry for mother's milk when you're thirsty. You need to cry when you're cold. These things are at the core of our being so that we can survive. And what you've just said there, like, I think because of that, I guess, millennia of genetic development that we have that is part of that survival instinct, we understand things, we grab things, we use things when they make our life easier, when they have purpose for us, when we see I can use this tool will improve the quality of my life, it will lessen my workload or increase my productivity or whatever that might be. When we take it out of the abstract into the functional, it's going to make my life better, then people will grab it.
Yeah, I had experienced that in a previous life. I was a director of technology in schools, and there was always that moment where, the teachers are just overwhelmed. I mean, the teacher has all the things that's on a teacher's plate, whether it's actually teaching or playing social worker or somewhere in between. To introduce something new to them is always difficult. It's like, look, I got so much going on already. To take something on top of that is overwhelming for them. But at the moment you can make it clear to them the value for them or how it will help them improve their education for their students or just improve their administrative functions, then they go, okay, now I got it. Great. Let's run with this. And then you can usually get them to be your biggest supporter and champion to other colleagues, teachers. And
yeah,
so forth.
You're right. And there you kind of hinted, without articulating it, you kind of hinted at one of the big roadblockers of innovation. And that's the time to experiment and play with things. Like you talk about teachers being very busy, but in all aspects of work and different industries, people are hardworking. People do their best. The economy globally at the moment, it's not in peak form. We're all working longer hours than our grandparents did, and all that sort of stuff. Many people working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Who has the time to be able to play with the new innovations, to experience and to get proficient at the tools? That's one of the actual real challenges, I think, in rolling out an innovation. Finding the time to let the workforce, finding time to let the people that you want to help, actually have that time to explore, experience, experiment with, so that then when it comes time for their workload, they can use it efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really showing my age here, but way back when we first started introducing computers in the classroom, as a permanent fixture there was a lot of reluctance on the part of teachers. They were new to the computing. They didn't really understand it and so forth. And when we started having internet and browsing, suddenly teachers are looking at, shopping sites or whatever, stuff for personal use. And, I had administrators that were just flipping out going, this is not what we wanted them to use. I'm like, no, time out. Let them do that. Let's, as long as it's safe and secure, because when they become familiar with browsing to search, I don't know, Amazon or whatever shopping site, now they're comfortable using the computer and they can figure out a way on their own to say, oh, the skills that I just taught myself to do whatever, I can transfer that to my instruction for my students. So always cautious to not block people too quickly or prevent them from learning the way that they learn best. But
I think that for me, I guess the memory I have that captures that is once upon a time when I was a much younger, much fitter young rooster. I used to be a lifesaver, that iconic Australian surf lifesaver. You had the little hat, the red and yellow, and all that sort of stuff. And go out there and very, very proud that I was able in my time there to participate in a few different rescues. But I remember, so always used to have the IRBs, the inflatable rescue boats, those big red things that a lot of people go by the nickname the rubber duckies.
Right.
You tip out, you go through the surf, and you've got the big long boards, the big Malibu boards, where the old school you'd paddle out and put someone in trouble on. And so you had different technologies in there. You had the big old Malibu boards. You had almost like the Baywatch little float that you could swim out and throw with a rope and then drag someone into. Different technologies: the rubber ducky, the Malibu board, the actual float. But I remember when the jet skis started to be able to be used. They're smaller, more maneuverable, they're fun, they're powerful, but it takes time to become proficient at using them, particularly in a dangerous environment in between the waves and in between the surf. Yeah. And you need to let people play. You'd need to let people go over in these jet skis and crash into waves and jump over things and spin around in the surf and do things that are like wildly, fantastically fun and kind of it's inverted commas, reckless. Like, you need to be able to handle the machine when it's in an unpredictable environment, because if you don't allow people to play with it, if you don't allow the people to jump on the jet ski and smash through the waves and have fun coming in and all that sort of stuff, if they get limited amount of, here is the course, here is how you use it, when it comes crunch time and you've got to rescue and seconds count, then you've got to be able to put it in the water, efficiently get there, do what you need to do, and get the person to safety.
Yeah, you need it to be second nature.
You need it to be second nature, and you can only do that if you've had time to play and explore. And that is true for all sorts of innovation.
Yeah, that's a great example. Terrific. All right, well, let's take a step back for a minute. Let's allow you the opportunity to tell us a bit about yourself, the path that brought you to where you are now, which is the HP Education Ambassador, so that we can kind of see through the lens through which you just answered the previous question.
Yeah, cool. Look, I'm a school teacher by trade, a primary school teacher. For those who are stateside, that's primarily, in Australia and in many parts of the world, we don't tend to have a middle school. So we have a primary school and secondary school. So primary school is kindergarten to year 6, and then secondary school is 7 to 12. So we sort of split mostly, not every single school, but I'd say 98% of schools in Australia and many of the countries where I actually work. I do a lot of work in New Zealand, and I lived and taught in Singapore, have that sort of system. And I know sometimes when I go over to America, it can be a little bit tricky where people don't realize that not every country has the middle school concept. So my primary school experience as a teacher, K to 6, taught for several years in Australia, public schools and Catholic schools. We've got a really interesting situation in Australia where about 30% of all schools are actually Catholic schools, Catholic school system.
Really?
Originally, the first education system that was set up, there were some very elitist private schools during colonization. They for the very wealthy and for the very what's the appropriate word, privileged. But a lot of the Irish nuns that came out during the settlement of Australia, of modern Australia, did the heavy lifting of educating the population. So the very first education systems in Australia weren't government run, weren't state schools, weren't public education. Actually, was Catholic. So there is a unique situation in Australia where still a hefty portion of the Australian population goes through education in a Catholic school. So
Interesting.
I taught in Catholic education and in public education and in some private schools as well. And then probably in my mid-20s, I went over to Singapore, and I lived in Singapore, and I worked as an ESL teacher. We don't tend to use that phrase now in Australia, that vernacular has changed, but English as a second language. And then at my school there, I actually worked at a British school in Singapore, and did some stuff with technology, and I guess the really interesting part for any of your listeners who are ever considering going overseas to teach abroad. I mean, one, just for your own personal development, that's fantastic. I think there's a Winston Churchill quote that's something along the lines of the world is a book, and if you never leave your country, you've only read one page. You don't get all that experience and that knowledge and that perspective of different peoples if you've not been able to travel and experience different cultures. But so I don't know. I like that quote. It's a little bit magical. Yeah. It's not always 100% true, because obviously you can travel in a bubble, or you can live in your own country and be open-minded and exposed to lots of things. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's kind of a nice saying. But for a young teacher who wants to, he or she wants to actually change their career relatively rapidly, most international schools employ teachers for either a 2-year or a 3-year cycle. And the school I was at was a 2-year cycle, so which meant that every 2 years, about 50% of the workforce actually goes back home to their home country. So if you stay more than one contract, or if you do a second or a third contract, you're one of the most senior people in the entire school, even though you might happen to be in your late 20s, which is how I found myself. So in my late 20s, I actually found myself as a senior member of the staff. We had 5 campuses across the country, and actually a campus in Indonesia and a campus in Malaysia as well. And I was able to have, I guess, senior executive leadership, and then principal or head teacher of one of the campuses pretty early in my teaching career, and that enabled me to get a taste of senior leadership, of school leadership, of mentoring, of coaching, of budgeting and fiscal support within a school, all those sorts of things. So came back to Australia and did a whole range of different things, and actually set up by accident this concept called Aussie Ed. Aussie Ed was a group on Twitter when in the heydays of Twitter, like about 10, 12 years ago, when it was quite ubiquitous with a lot of people, and Aussie Ed became the largest online network of teachers in Australia. So kind of set that up by accident, and as a result of that, I had a substantive Twitter following or social media presence. And as soon as you have that, then you start getting noticed by a few different people and a few different companies, and suddenly it dawned upon me that, and this was the big moment. I had a few changes in my life. Like I'll be open and honest with you. My marriage had broken down, and this traditional sort of view of I'm a good man who works hard, goes to his school, sticks by the rules, does what you're supposed to do as a good dad, as a good husband. I thought everything was supposed to fall into place, and it didn't work out that way, and I was a bit confused by that. And then that's when I lent in. That's when I lent into a lot of the social media stuff, and all of a sudden these opportunities came from all over the world. And I learned that my sphere of influence, originally as a teacher, was just my classroom, and then as I got into leadership was my school community, and then suddenly I realized that my sphere of influence was beyond that. It was
larger, right?
Yeah, it was as large as the reach that I could generate, and it spanned countries and even continents. And then from there, a whole range of opportunities sort of presented itself. I was able to, at first, co-create some books with a few people before I wrote my own book that went particularly well and became a bestseller in a couple of different countries, which was pretty darn cool. And then, once that happens, and you start getting invited to do keynotes here and there, and you refine your speaking and your presence and the way you present, and before you know it, Department of Education's knocking on the door and asking, can you run and lead very significant projects across the state. And then towards the ending of that, post-COVID, I get this strange phone call out of the blue with HP saying that they really want to double down on quality of learning, quality of digital pedagogical practice. And they're aware that they need some good, strong educator voices to be able to do that. So the role of the
we're moving beyond just hardware, and we're talking
spot on
the next level.
Spot on. Actually making sure that the tool, when we talk about innovation, that the tool is being used for the purpose that it actually is rolled out into the classroom. And at the end of the day, you can talk to the CIO, you can talk to the the digital team, you can talk to the principal, you could talk to the digital director. Everyone should be moving in the direction of how do we impact on learning outcomes. And HP has that vision of they actually call it the HP way. And this is interesting in itself, actually. I was very, very nervous. I had been in schools for 27 years as an educator or a leader of some sort. It was my whole world. And I was about to take the dive out into the big corporate sort of HP had offered this position. They explained it and went through the The process had 5 interviews. Actually, it was quite a
Wow.
substantive
So
process.
it wasn't just handed to you. You actually had to go through a traditional
I'll
recruitment
tell you now,
process.
I bloody earned it.
I'm sure you did.
For the direct Australianness there, but yeah, no, we sort of agreed to terms and all that sort of stuff, and I was a bit hesitant. I was still nervous, like, how brutal is it going to be working for a big multinational, big tech company, the tech company that founded Silicon Valley, right? Like,
Right.
Silicon Valley is built around where HP started, and
Long before Apple, by the way, or
sorry, long before Apple.
Before Apple, by the way, right? Everybody thinks of.
Wozniak worked at HP while he tinkered with building Apple on the weekends. Like, I know
everybody just thinks Apple, created the world, and not knocking Apple, but they were not first.
No. But let's say he cut his teeth at HP, old Wozniak.
There you go.
You know what's really cool? I have gone out to the garage at Silicon Valley where
the HP one, okay,
the HP garage where literally in the 30s, the old garage and a lot of the original industry that built up around the original HP componentry that they made in the 30s, which was the literal birth of Silicon Valley. There's a little creek that runs down the back of the garage. I didn't realize this, but you know what the creek is?
No,
it's Adobe Creek. Adobe Creek runs at the back, down the back of the HP garage, because the founder of Adobe actually was in the area working on the periphery of some of that original HP sort of presence, and that's why Adobe is where it is down in Santa Clara. Right down, you can draw a straight line from the back of HP's the HP garage. You can follow on the map. Right down to Adobe headquarters, where Adobe Creek runs.
Here I am, the American, and I don't know this history. That's great. Thanks for educating me.
But I during the onboarding, the first 2 weeks of HP, you learn about this concept called the HP way, and it's funny. It's still in a way run like it's a family business. Like the two founders, Bill and Dave, are still there. They had their manifesto of how they like to do business, what their key values were, and it's literally written in a book called the HP Way. They spelled it out, and when you become a HP employee, before you actually start working, you have to go through this induction to understand the HP Way, and HP will walk away and proudly walk away from deals that are ethically not within the HP way, that they will behave in a way that is the HP way, and I think that's why it's the founding company of Silicon Valley, and it still has such a good, strong reputation today.
So they're willing to walk away from some real financial gains if it doesn't align with their beliefs, right? Is that what you're saying?
I think the lesson there is yes, because when you value your integrity, when you value your ethics, morality, what you stand for, you actually have long-term gain. It might be a short-term sugar hit deal that might not pay off, but when you are the leader, when you are the innovator, when you are the voice in the room that has the integrity, that's where people will go to when they want to hear the truth, when they want to do real business, and that's where I guess that's how they do business. That's that reputational strength that they have.
So in bringing you on as the ambassador, as they have, what is the expectation for you in your position? I mean, obviously you're an evangelist and you're spreading the good word, but is there some specific tasks or goals that they set out in the position? And are you the first person in the position?
Yeah. So actually, they set up 18 different this position in 18 different countries simultaneously.
Okay.
It I guess, like anything, culturally, concepts sometimes are embraced in some cultures and in some countries, and not as strongly in others. And I think that's normal for whenever you roll out something. But fortunately for me, it was very well received here in Australia and New Zealand. So I work across Australia and New Zealand, and it's from a my job kind of is split in half. I have two elements to it. So half of my work is advocating for good digital pedagogical practice. What is, when you talk innovation, like what is very good use of technology, and how can that like improve learning outcomes? How do we advocate for that? How do I amplify that? How do I tell stories about that? How do I help facilitate, make that happen? That's fun, man. Like, I love it. I'm a big nerd. I love teaching a little bit too much. I love tech a little bit too much. That half of my job, that's just absolutely magical. And the other half is, I guess, being the almost like the statesman in the room. So when deals are being done, and sometimes you've got CIOs or procurement officers who have a very clear vision of what they need to do, and price is very important and all that sort of stuff. And salespeople do what salespeople do, and they're trying to meet the needs of everything. Making sure that we're talking about what are the needs of the end user. In this case, what are the needs of the teachers? What are the needs of the students? And whilst price is super important, the quality of the learning experience, how do we enhance those learning values? How do we engage with a product, but something that's more than a product, not just a box? How do we make sure the entire experience, the entire ecosystem of support actually delivers better learning outcomes as a result? And that's the second half of my job. That's tricky, that's nuanced.
Sure.
That's I guess sometimes openly embraced, and you're talking to people who have great, strong vision and good culture and all that sort of stuff. And then sometimes you're talking to other people who, actually, we hadn't even thought about that. We were just trying to get the most RAM for the least amount of money. Making sure that the product suits the needs of the teacher and the learner, that's pretty darn important.
Well, that's impressive, because it sounds to me anyway like it's not just pushing SKUs. It's not how many boxes or how many whatever. There's actually a much greater involvement or a deeper commitment to education, which is admirable. So that's great that you're in this position. I wish you the best of luck. But do you regularly interact with the other 17 or so colleagues of yours that are in similar positions? Is there frequent communication?
There's a great team. There's a great HP worldwide team led by an American, Charlie Radman, who leads a team of several people in America. But in his team, there's a core team. There's people from India and all that sort of stuff. TJ Sweeney, big shout out to TJ Sweeney if she's listening to your podcast. But look, there's a core worldwide education team that looks after strategy and product performance, research, evidence, global initiatives, all that sort of stuff. Delegates with organizations like UNESCO, World Wildlife Fund, all those big global type initiatives. And then there's the ambassadors that sort of sit around the world, and then of course there's the actual normal vertical sales structure that exists within a big multinational with like the national sales directors and all that sort of stuff. So I work in tandem, sort of in between. Work with, in a very friendly way, the vertical alignment within the organization from a sales perspective, but also with that global worldwide team, making sure that we are all in sync. The only trouble is a little bit like the time that I did the podcast with you, being stuck over in the Southern Hemisphere. When it's time for the Europeans to meet, or it's time for the North Americans to meet, not always super convenient for the old digger back out in Australasia. Not so much fun.
You're preaching to the choir. So the company I'm with, Cat Labs, they're based primarily, they're based in Ireland, and we have people all over the world. But before I joined us, so right now it's 7:30 in the morning for me here in New York. And prior to our start time at 7, I had a 6 a.m. meeting because it's trying to balance. So there's, I'll get online, and the people that I work with have already been working for 6 hours, and it's a tough balancing act, to get the schedule right and the timing right. But
you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to meet them halfway and do one of those digital nomad things, and maybe just set yourself up in the middle of the Mediterranean. Get a nice little work from home pad in the Isle of Crete or something like that. I did hear that Greece has got some digital nomad visas. Put in a lot of IT infrastructure on Crete. Maybe you might meet them halfway, like a gentleman.
I would love to do that.
Like, take one for the team, not for your
Of course, right?
Like, just
I'll have to uproot and go to some place warm and beautiful and settle in there. So we'll have to see if I can become more of a team player with that regard. So
I think so. It would only be fair.
I think you're absolutely right. So let's dig a little bit deeper here. Go back to the innovation for a bit. You personally, do you have something that you would consider to be your first significant ed tech innovation, and how did that come about?
Yeah, do you know what? Actually, I can't quite recall if I shared this story on our previous discussion or not. Did I talk about the time I used the voice to text typing with my boy? I did. Well, I don't know if
that's fine.
That's all fine. So for those people who didn't, I'll do the flyover version of this, because this is really where EdTech opened my eyes up to what the potential really is, and it's a good one, because it's a lesson about inclusion, but at the same time, it's not about just including a child who had particular needs. It's if we can learn this lesson, then every student could benefit from techniques like this.
Right.
Just what we call best practice, right? Best practice. Mm-hmm. So effectively, I was teaching grade 6. I had a boy that was being reintegrated into mainstream schooling. He was a high-functioning autistic child or child with autism, amongst a couple other needs as well. This is several years ago. He would always walk around with this big old thick textbook, like this gigantic big thick textbook. It was nuts, right? And but if I gave him a pen to write with, he couldn't in an hour's lesson. He couldn't get out a sentence. He couldn't write a sentence. He'd be taken out with the special needs teacher, and she'd do some literacy work with him, some intensive sort of intervention. And I remember asking her about these books that he always carried. I said, "Can he even read them? Like, what does he get?" No. His reading level is like that of a 6.5, 7-year-old. Like, you've got to give him these books, and there were these real simple things that just had a few pictures and maybe a sentence or a couple of keywords and all that sort of stuff, so that he could visually decode what it was. And he kind of struggled with that. Like, it was really, really hard to keep him focused on anything. But he would sit quietly and just sort of turn through these pages of these books. He'd disengage from what was happening in class, but he'd turn through these big old thick dusty textbook looking things from a different era almost. And I let him do it because I figured, reading's reading. If he's enjoying it, what do I care?
Sure.
What do I care?
Right.
And I then stumbled across, this was the early days of the Google for Education suite. And Google Docs had a new feature of voice to text. And so I allowed this boy, instead of using his pen or pencil to write with, that he could use voice typing. And he suddenly went from going to one sentence to he would verbally vomit out just like an A4 page of not like sentences that ran into each other and no structure or anything like that. But
just more, just
it
higher.
Was so much more, right. Volume-wise, it was so much more. It was an explosion, an eruption of these ideas where previously there had been nothing. So I would let him like print that out, paste it into his textbook. So he had the same experience, expectations as everyone else in the class. And I did the best I could with that. Fast forward, big win, great. Child use tech. Child that could only write one sentence now writes an A4 page. I'm happy as. That's fantastic. Huge win. Then, like a decade and a half later, I get this message on LinkedIn. Mr. Salakas, do you remember me? Yeah, I definitely remember you.
Yeah, stood out a bit.
And then he still actually comments on my on some of my posts and everything. He's got that, let's say, lacks a little bit of the nuance of some of the the delicacies sometimes on how you may phrase different things when you might want to get your point across. So I still see that same issue in some of his writings. But he comes, Mr. Salakas, do you remember? Of course I remember you. I just wanted you to know that I'm about to defend my thesis. I'm getting my PhD in physics. And then, 6-8 months later, Mr. Salakas, just want you to know I'm lecturing now at Macquarie University, and actually,
that's amazing.
As of last year, he's an associate professor. This is a child who I was told could only write barely one sentence and couldn't understand those big old thick textbooks. Because, of course, what were those big old thick textbooks? They were all physics and scientific phenomena. And he was, you know what? He understood every single part of it. He just lacked the ability to express what he understood. And that technology, that unlocked that. He actually said to me he still uses voice-to-text typing now to get a lot of his work done. So, look.
So as a teacher and a human, that's an amazing feeling for you, a feeling of success. That's credible. That's
the best story ever. So then as we get all of these sorts of technologies that come out, and this is why I don't really like the fad stuff. Because when I look at that, what happened there? Let's unpack. That's a success story. What happened there? Actually, what happened there was not anything that was particularly wow or new. It was voice typing. It was a different. It allowed someone to write. One of the oldest things that we do in education, we write and express ideas. I liked it because it was good traditional pedagogical practice, but it was technology that just amplified that practice to allow this child to have huge successes that he previously was unable to have. And I think that is the very best way to look at educational technology. How can educational technology, let's not ignore old traditional pedagogical practices that are winners. Let's not turn our back on centuries plus of successful teaching techniques. Let's look at what we do that works. Let's analyze the science of learning, and let's use technology to leverage and enhance those scientific concepts that we understand. This is how children work. This is how brains function. This is how we can actually amplify learning.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a tech person, for me, I always try to express to my teachers and so forth that the technology is only good if it enhances the education. It's not just to replicate it. Like, in other words, taking a paper, a photocopy or a ditto or whatever you would call them, and just making it digital, that doesn't change anything other than the delivery method, So, all right, well, that's an incredible story, and kudos to you for having the foresight or the ability to recognize the possibility or the potential in the student and coming up with a tool to match it and bring those worlds together. So that's wonderful. But let's now take a look at it maybe a different way, not that specific example, but do you have any examples maybe where you initially thought that you had this really innovative idea, but then you took a closer look and realized that it actually lacked a little bit of substance? And if so, like, what are some key indicators that maybe the listeners should be mindful of to avoid this trap in their own context, whether it be education or other fields?
Yeah, look, I think two areas that got me very, very excited Yet when you lent in, probably didn't stack up from a learning impact sense, and for similar-ish reasons perhaps. And one is, I would say, VR, and the other would be drones. I got very, very excited about drones. I loved the when I first saw the drone, and I've got a couple little drones, and you know what? So much joy, so much fun. I did like that you could code them and you could get them in sync, and even the potential employment opportunities with drone piloting and all sorts of stuff. I did see, wow, here is something super duper cool. In practicality, how rolling out the teacher training that would be required, rolling out the the equipment, the maintenance, how effective and how much does that impact on the quality of the overall learning experience of a child? I don't know if you get the ROI. There's a word that I've learned now that I'm in corporate land, ROI. I don't think we get the right return on the investment of that. I think to be able to do an initiative, we need to look at that ROI. We need to go, okay, this is how much we're investing. What is the return on that investment? What am I getting out of that investment? And does that investment justify? Is that investment justified by the outcomes that are achieving? Something like drones, as fun as they are and as awesome as they are, I don't think I have seen a way that we can get there, and that's probably why we had a whole explosion of excitement, and then it's niche into different STEM programs and different STEM initiatives now. And I think VR was a similar sense. I think so much potential, so immersive, so wonderful, but the heavy lift required on the teacher to generate content and experience that was purposeful to justify the learning that a child then got out of using that, not enough ROI. Like the heavy lift that is needed, not only just to have the first or second or third fun pre-prepared lesson, but ongoing over a term, over a semester, over a year. Is it really there?
I agree with you completely. It had lots of promise, and there still are wonderful applications for it. But like you said, with the drones, it's sort of niche. And what you realize is that maybe certain environments, the virtual, the whole idea of virtual is better or lends itself to certain environments. But overall, you're right. The return on investment has to be measured, and you have to measure it not just in terms of dollars and cents, but does what you're doing affect the largest number of students possible, which is always something you have to consider. Of course, you had your special student who had a special need, but overall, when you're implementing a technology program, the ultimate goal is, how do I get this in front of the most people possible? So that's always a consideration.
And I think that's one of the challenges. Here's another sort of key business word: scalability. Right? Like, what's the scalability of rolling out programs like this in a niche targeted environment where you've got one teacher who's highly trained in able to use VR or create VR experiences? Yeah, do you know what? Probably can get measured success there. But as you scale that and roll that out over an entire school, over an entire district, over an entire state, I don't think that the scalability, the quality does not remain in that scalability. And beyond that, you can only have a certain amount of students using a headset at any one time. Right. So what the hell are the other kids doing in the class? Can't do it. So look, does that mean it's a rubbish idea? Absolutely not. Bloody fantastic. It's so much fun. And you know what? Way useful as technology matures and becomes more ubiquitous and becomes that every child can use it at once and becomes a little bit more portable and user-friendly, look, there might be space for it. But as it stands at this moment, when you ask me what did I explore and what did I learn and what did I take away from that, then yeah, I looked into the drones. I got excited about the VR. But what is that ROI?
Right.
Is it scalable? What's the impact? And if you can't answer those questions and make sure that for the effort that you're putting in, you're getting the appropriate benefit to the teaching and learning, then do you know what? Let's put our energies and our money and our time and our training into initiatives that are going to have a greater impact on improving the overall learning experience for the child.
Well, don't you think that's where the Chromebook sort of came from, in a sense, in that instead of, you were talking about what are the other kids doing? So in the classroom previously, we had, if we were lucky, 5 computers with however many students in the classroom. But the Chromebook changed that. They brought the price way down. It made it much more possible to outfit every single student with their own device. And I think that's when we really started seeing the engagement and the advancement.
Look, you're right. You're right. When it suddenly becomes accessible and scalable to be able to do something, then it's more viable. And it's probably why when people talk about BYOD, it's probably why when I put my teacher hat on, I go, yeah, do you know what? I kind of like, bring your own designated device as opposed to bring your own technology where everyone's bringing something different. Because
the tech director agrees.
Yeah, like when you sort of have, okay, I'm a teacher and I've set up for the Windows experience for this, and I've got this kid bringing this tablet, and this kid's on this device, and this kid's on a Chrome, and this kid's on that, and then only actually 70% of the class are getting the full experience for what I've actually built. Do you know what? That teaches that I can't spend the time, I can't invest the time building that great experience because it's so inconsistent. So they revert to more simplistic, and then suddenly you've got a school that's got a technology program, yet it's not actually getting maximum benefit of. So I do like some sort of uniformity with the devices, so that the experience if a teacher is going to invest the time and energy and professional development in creating something, then the students actually get to maximize the benefits that would come from that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. If you spend, 3/4 of the instructional time you have troubleshooting various devices and everything, not much is accomplished, and that's a waste of time and energy for everybody. So, yeah, I think the continuity, the consistency, and it really improves instruction whenever possible. But there's financial constraints to everything, so.
No, and that's when things have to be worked out, right? And that's where you have to draw that balance. This goes right back, when you ask me my role, how that actually works, and that's why it's so important that there are roles like mine. That when you've got the salespeople talking to the tech director, that we're actually making sure that we're talking about learning outcomes and we're getting that balance perfectly right. So that all those sorts of needs are addressed, are looked at, are dealt with, and then the school can make a decision, the best informed decision possible.
Agree. All right, we've had a great time. I have so much more I want to get to, so I'm going to try to keep moving here, and I really do appreciate.
I go down some rabbit holes. So why don't we do a quick fire? How about you do a quick fire? You fire fast, and I'll fire back fast, and we'll just go bang, bang, bang.
I will, for certain. Let's try that. Okay. So what I wanted to get at was this concept that I came up in my mind of being innovative about taking another person or another innovator's innovation and innovating it for a different use. Okay, did you follow all that? So, for example, this is what made me start thinking about this. I was doing some research on you, of course, and I came across a post you did about the pedagogy wheel. Okay, so you mentioned that your fellow Aussie, Alan Carrington, he was able to take what he created, modify it a bit, and instead of its intended use for higher ed, he was able to get it to be very useful for younger learners, which was very impressive. And we can talk about the pedagogy wheel and so forth and its impact, but that's not really my question. My question is this: is how do you or others identify innovations that are put forth with an intended use and innovate the innovation for other potential uses. And the reason I'm asking this is because I'm trying to find a through line through all the previous episodes I've done on this podcast. I've been trying to identify a pattern or traits that in general that most innovators possess and makes them stand apart from others. So that's the real question with a very long lead up.
Yeah, no. Do you know what? The simple answer is, if you're looking for the common through line, the common thread there in technology, I think you're going to struggle to find it. The answer to me is it's the humanity. What do we do? We ancient technologies, ancient peoples. We learn from each other. We share stories. And half the troubles in society is when we lose that connection to our community. When we become isolated, we get our youth disenfranchised, all that sort of stuff. These are all the problems. These are all the ills of the modern world. So what's the best case of this stuff? The best is where you have those tight communities where you actually do learn from each other. So what did Alan do? Alan Carrington, like with the pedagogy wheel. Like, how did I learn about that? Do you know what? I went to a concept that we have in Australia here called a Teach Meet, where super informal Teach Meet started by everyone would go to the pub and you'd have a beer and you got 2 minutes to share what are you doing that's working. What are you doing that's working? You got 2 minutes, that's it. No, nothing more than 2 minutes. You had 2 minutes and it was very, very informal. But what it did was make some sort of collegiality. It let you learn what else was happening at the school down the road, at the school, in the town over, and then suddenly you could take what that person's doing, learn that, and then you could trial that yourself. Little grassroots ways that we can actually come together as a community are very, very powerful, because this is what humanity is. We are meant to actually connect. You and I sitting here in other sides of the planet. How did we connect? We met each other online. You've talked about there. You saw a post of mine. That post, that's years ago. That's very impressive. You did a lot of homework. Look, obviously I wrote an article, or you've read a blog, or you've seen in my LinkedIn post from a long time ago. But we can have digital online communities that are still powerfully full of human connection that we can learn and trust and talk and grow. I think the more that we lean back to our humanity, the more that we're able to share ideas and let that sort of stuff foster. It's easy to say and that's hard to do, but I think that's the key forward. If you're a teacher and you're unsure, like, try to reach out, try to find your group online, try to go to some events, try to go to the local community, try to, this is how you see that things are happening. And once you open that door and you realize, wow, do you know what? There are some crazy people that will get up at 1 a.m. That will have their morning coffee at 5:30 so that they can talk to their friends in Ireland at 6 for the meeting. Like, suddenly, you know what? You find these passionate educators that are busting to connect with you, busting to share ideas, and want to see you thrive. And that's where humanity can really shine.
Very true. Very true. All right, let's move on to some advice for some of the listeners to walk away with. So try to be brief here. Can you give just maybe one example of a practical strategy that educators can implement tomorrow to begin cultivating the mindset of innovation among their students and colleagues?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the concept of purple cow?
I don't think so.
It's the Purple Cow by Seth Godin, right? And what Seth sort of said there was almost a marketing strategy, right? If you are driving down the countryside and you're in your car and you're zipping along and you're looking out the window and you see brown cow, brown cow, brown cow, brown cow, brown cow, And then you see purple cow. You'll remember that purple cow. That purple cow is remarkable. It stands out. It's memorable. That remarkableness makes it stick out from everything else that you've seen. So you might not remember the individuals of the thousands of other brown cows that you've seen, but my gosh, you're going to remember that purple cow. So how do we enable our teachers to become remarkable? How do we let them make their content remarkable so it stands out from the same lesson, so that it is memorable for the students? And I think remarkable teachers need remarkable leaders, because I think teachers are usually people that enjoyed school. They're usually people that loved the structure, the expectation, and they don't like stepping out of line. So you need to almost, as a leader, if you want innovation, you need to green light innovation. You need to, and this is true in education, but this is true in all workforces. If you need to green light it, you need to demonstrate it, you need to support it, and then that will give people the opportunity to make purple cow experiences in any field.
That's a really good point there. All right, excellent. So now you do have, though, many educators that are feeling really overwhelmed and overwhelmed by the pressure to constantly innovate. So what advice would you give to someone like that who's feeling this pressure, and how can they approach innovation in a sustainable and meaningful way rather than feeling it's just another item that's, already on their full plate?
I think one of the things that we're lacking is what is it that modern education is trying to achieve? What is it that we want? And I think we need a discourse. We need to talk it through. We need to understand what is it that we're trying to do so that we can best prepare our students for the future. That's an important conversation for us holistically in education, in the education industry, to be able to have. And if you're unable to have that, you need to be able to morally and ethically in your own self, what are you trying to do to best prepare your students for success? Because you know what, at the end of the day, education actually is about trying to achieve two things. It is either, for all the lovely words that we give it, and we say, we're holistic and we're trying to nurture and uplift and change demographics, all that sort of stuff, and give care to students who don't have care at home, and all this sort of stuff is true. Pardon me, I'm going to sneeze. All that stuff is true, but the reality is education is there to do two things. One, it's to prepare students for higher learning, if that's the correct pathway, if it's primary school, high school, university, or prepare students for the workforce. It's those two things. So it boils down to that. So how can I, in my role as the teacher, help all the children in my care achieve either or both of those two things? What can I do that can prepare them for the next level of learning or prepare them for the workforce? And as long as I am moving along with that clear end goal, I know where the goalposts are, I know how to get there. We don't have to be overwhelmed and distracted by every single tool. This is what I'm trying to achieve. This is what I need to do in my teaching, whatever my subject might be. I need to do, literacy. I need to help with their grammar. I need to help with their spelling. I need to help with their fluency, whatever it might be. Do that to the best of your ability. Explore and be open to different tools that might enhance that. Keep it simple. Know where the end goal is. Know what you need to do. Explore things that help you do your job better. And then you're on a winner.
That's terrific advice. I think that's great. Now, taking a look back at your career, what piece of advice would you give you, your younger self, just starting out as an advocate for innovation and education, that you think would have accelerated your impact or shifted your perspective in a significant way?
I didn't realize that people would care about what I said, what I had to say.
Really?
I had no idea. I mean, and I was like a leader within my school environment and all that sort of stuff, but I don't think I was aware of the interest level that people actually have in, if you're sharing good ideas and you're open for discussion, you're open to learn, and you're open to helping other people. I don't think I realized just how, I didn't believe, I didn't understand, I didn't comprehend that people cared of what I had to say at scale. And so I wish I learned that lesson earlier. Because I reckon I would have been able to do good on a grander scale earlier in my career. Now, that's that. And I don't know what question is coming next, but I'm going to beat you to what my gut instinct tells might be around the corner. And I'm going to give you the best Australian sort of finish that I can. You know, boomerang, right? Boomerang.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, here's a good old Aussie dad joke. What do you call a boomerang that doesn't come back? A stick. But no. But so boomerang though, you know, traditional Aboriginal Australian hunting tool. You throw it. You normally try and throw it above a tree. It scares the birds. You know, birds fly up, get a bit of a whack, and you can get some tucker, have some dinner. If you miss, you don't have to go and get the boomerang. It circles back, comes to you. It's all about efficiency. There's an innovation for you, right? Like ancient peoples using aerodynamics of shaped wood to be able to efficiently gather their dinner and gather their prey. I think when we're talking about education, and I mentioned to you earlier about the need for humanity, and this is how we actually share ideas, and this is how we learn. I think we need to be love boomerangs. I think we need to pour out love in the world as often and as frequently as possible. The more kindness, the more goodness, the more we're willing to help other people, the more we're willing to get up at 3 a.m. and talk to another person, or stay up late and have a yarn, and or the more that we're able to send that extra email or whatever that might be, or spend that extra 5 minutes with that kid who's just having a little bit of trouble, or the time that you want to look after and try a new technique to help that kid who's struggling with writing to be able to unpack and unleash a whole volley of words. The more love that we can pour out in the world, the more love gets to boomerang back around to us. I think if we pour out more love, love will come back to us. And I think that love is in the shape of obviously good feeling and good energy and vibes and well-being and all that sort of stuff. But the more we're helping other people, the more innovation, the more change, the more growth, the better the world would be. So I think the whole world needs to be a little bit more Australian. I think the whole world needs to learn the lesson of the boomerang and be a bit more like a love boomerang and pour out love and let love come back.
That's a great message. That really is. Very well said. So what's next for you?
Well, it's pretty late at night. I'm probably going to go and have a kip in a minute. But look, no, what's next for me? I have a new book coming out in a couple of weeks. It's pretty exciting, actually.
Congratulations. What's it called?
Yeah. It's called Fable, but it's spelled Faible. What I have done is I attempted to list every different AI in education hot topic, concern, issue, controversy that I could. I made a big old list on a piece of paper, and I tried to invoke my Greek heritage and look at Aesop's fables, depending on how you like to pronounce it, and Aesop, the boy who cried wolf, all those sorts of things. And what I've done is I have then made a fable on each of the AI issues that I could think would be challenging us in education. The idea here is that if I'm a school leader and I want to open up dialogue in my staff, and I want to have hypothetically let's say I want to have a conversation about the bias that is built into the data set of AI models. That's a really complex, nuanced thing. Maybe I can just photocopy a little bit from this book, have this fable that tells the moral of that story. It's a little bit easier to digest. It's simple language, and it's got some probing questions at the ending just to make people think about and being aware of bias that does exist within the data set within an AI model. So those types of things. So hence Fable.
Great name.
Fable with the AI in there.
Now, when is that going to be available?
I am working with my editor at the moment, and I'm being very slow in fixing up my edits. I'm hoping maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward.
Pretty soon. Pretty soon. I've got the art. I've actually already seen the artwork from the publisher. The book cover is designed and ready to go. It looks pretty awesome, actually. Okay.
Well, we'll look forward to that for sure. Yeah. What was you did mention earlier, but can you the name of the last book?
A Mammoth Lesson: Teaching in the Digital Age.
Okay, we'll make sure to get a link to that in the show notes as well. And if there's anything else you want us to put in there. So I always finish up with a really silly question. I don't know why. I have this weird curiosity about people's devices and what they use on a personal level. So phones, computers.
HP, yeah.
I suspected as much. On the phone side of things?
I'm going to get myself in trouble. Now I've got an iPhone.
Okay. No, it's just, I always find it, most people go one way or the other. Either they're huge Apple fans but there are people in between.
No, do you know what? I guess you use what you know. You use what you know. Like, it's a good product. I don't think you can argue with it. It's not a good product. It's user-friendly. It's what I know. Do you know what? I hate in a group chat when someone's got a green bubble, mate. I don't even know if I can be friends. I don't even. Do you know? I'm a single man. I'm a single man looking for love. Here's a bit of an overshare. I'm a single man looking for love. I was texting a pretty young lady the other day, and came back with a green bubble, and I went, "Oh God, you know what?
I can't do that. I can't live with you. I can't."
I felt so silly. Like,
sorry, you're smart, you're attractive, you meet all the other boxes, but I can't deal with the green dot. So that's great. Yeah. All right, well, Brett, this has been wonderful. I always appreciate time with you. I'd love to have you back at some point, especially after the book comes out. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time today.
No worries. And you remember, let's get those love boomerangs flying around the world.
Agree.
That's a wrap on this episode of Innovator Insights. A huge thanks to Brett Salakas for sharing his journey from teacher to global education ambassador. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to visit our website, innovatorinsights.io. From there, you can find more episodes and subscribe to our mailing list to stay updated on the latest in technology and innovation. And if you found this discussion valuable, please share it with a friend or colleague. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.